You're not college material. Spoken to a boy in 8th grade by a teacher who saw futures like sealed envelopes, for words that were supposed to close a chapter before it had even begun. Desmond Carter never forgot them. Now, 20 years later, he sat across from that same teacher in a school library that hadn't changed much. Her name was Ms. Delacroix, grayer now, stiffer around the eyes, but still carried herself like her words could shape destinies. She didn't recognize him. Not yet. Desmond adjusted the wireless mic clipped to his collar. Behind him, his camera operator Marcus gave a silent thumbs up. The room was lit softly for the shoot. 2-point setup, just enough contrast to make her look noble, wise. That was the point. Make her feel safe. Make her believe this was a tribute. Ms. Delacroix smiled politely, hands folded in front of her on the table. She thought this was going to be about her. It wasn't. Desmond's voice was even, almost gentle. Do you remember telling a student he wasn't college material? He watched her face. First came the squint, confusion. Then the widening, recognition. And then the shift, fear. That student was me. The silence in the room wasn't awkward. It was surgical. She opened her mouth. Nothing came out. And just like that, Desmond Carter reclaimed the narrative. This was what it looked like when the boy you dismissed came back, holding the mic. The neighborhood Desmond Carter grew up and didn't make room for dreamers. East Cleveland in the 90s was mostly cracked sidewalks, corner stores behind bulletproof glass, and police sirens doubling as lullabies. Kids grew up fast there. They learned quickly that the world hadn't been built with them in mind. Desmond's mother, Patricia Carter, held down 2 jobs, sometimes 3. During the day, she cleaned offices downtown, riding 2 buses each way to scrub toilets for people who'd never once wondered what it cost her. At night, she stocked shelves at the Kroger on Euclid. Coming home after midnight, her uniform carrying the smell of floor wax and fatigue. Desmond spent his evenings alone. Books became his escape. He devoured them, library copies so overdue they threatened fines his mother couldn't pay. She left dinner covered in the microwave, mac and cheese, maybe some box rice, and Desmond would eat while reading, dropping crumbs onto pages about places he couldn't imagine and people who didn't look like him but still felt familiar. He wasn't a star student. His grades hovered, sometimes A, B, sometimes a low C. Math never made sense to him. Science felt too far from anything real. But language, stories, history, that felt like something Desmond understood on a cellular level. Those weren't subjects. They were survival manuals. While other boys found their identity in the sound of basketballs on blacktop or learned how to flirt with trouble, Desmond found his in words. He filled notebooks with made-up stories, drew maps of imaginary cities, wrote poems so clumsy he went rereading them. But he never stopped writing, not even when kids called it weird or soft. At Jefferson High, he thought he might find space to grow. It was supposed to be one of the better schools in the district, a low bar. The building had the brutal architecture of a place built during economic crisis. Yellow linoleum, flickering lights, lockers that didn't latch. But it still carried promise. Then he met Ms. Delacroix. She taught 8th grade English like someone counting days until retirement. Strict, sharp, and immovable. Her red pen was less a tool and more a weapon. She sorted her students with silent efficiency. There were the college track kids, the ones with newer clothes, stable homes, and parents who'd gone to college. They were often white, sometimes Asian. Occasionally a light-skinned black kid with parents who were teachers or social workers. Then there were the regulars, kids she gave just enough to keep moving. And then the lost causes, the ones she never looked in the eye unless they acted out. For those, she had sarcasm and silence. Desmond thought he was regular, maybe even college track on his best days. He turned in assignments on time, got B+ on essays, and participated in class. He asked questions, not to show off, but because he was genuinely curious. He saw things in literature others didn't. He wanted to talk about them. But Ms. Delacroix didn't see curiosity. She saw interruption. She saw a kid reaching too far. The day everything shifted came in October. They were studying To Kill a Mockingbird, one of those books teachers used to pat themselves on the back for tackling racism without ever stepping outside the safe confines of white-centered literature. Desmond had spent the weekend thinking about a passage, Scout and Boo Radley, and how fear was often just inherited storytelling. He thought it tied into racism, how prejudice was less about knowing people and more about swallowing inherited myths. He raised his hand. Ms. Delacroix glanced at him, then gave a small nod. I was thinking, Desmond began, about how Scout realizes people only fear Boo because of stories. Like, maybe Harper Lee saying racism works that way too. People pass it down, not because they know, but because they're taught to fear. A few students turned to look at him. Michael Chong, one of the smart kids, even nodded like he agreed, but Ms. Delacroix's expression didn't change. That's not what Harper Lee intended, she said flatly. You're overcomplicating it. The book is about a girl growing up in the South, not some grand metaphor. She paused, then added, loud enough to carry. Some students try to make things more complicated than they are, because they think it makes them sound smart. Laughter started in the back. Low at first, nervous, unsure. Then more voices joined in. It grew like weeds. Desmond's chest locked up. He wasn't just embarrassed. He was exposed. He'd made the mistake of caring, of thinking his voice mattered, of showing them who he really was. That was the moment he stopped raising his hand. For the rest of the year, Desmond fell silent in her class. He read the books, did the homework, showed up, but he never volunteered again. He never offered another insight. He wrote what the study guide wanted. He became invisible, and in the quiet, he learned something ugly. There were two kinds of intelligence in that room, the kind that made teachers nod and give A's, and the kind that made them raise an eyebrow and say, don't overthink. He was clearly the second kind. 3 weeks after Desmond stopped raising his hand, the parent-teacher conference happened. It was a Thursday night in November, cold enough that the wind stung through Desmond's jacket as he waited outside the classroom. His mother, Patricia, had taken the evening off from her day's shift, an unpaid risk that could get her written up. He'd pressed her best dress, borrowed lipstick from a neighbor, and straightened her back like she was walking into a courtroom. Desmond sat on the floor outside the classroom, pretending to read a book while he listened through the wall. The conversations before theirs were hopeful. Michael Chang's mother was told her son was being considered for advanced classes. Jennifer Hartman's parents were praised for raising a natural leader. Desmond heard laughter, encouragement, easy confidence exchanged between teachers and parents who spoke the same language, of potential, of Ivy dreams. Then it was their turn. Patricia knocked, even though the door was open. She always knocked. On office doors, school doors, doors that weren't really meant for people like her. Mrs. Carter? Ms. Delacroix's voice came through the wall, brisk and clipped. Please have a seat. Desmond heard chairs scrape, papers shift. Thank you for meeting with me, his mother said. Her voice had changed. More formal, vowels tight, grammar perfect. What she called her work voice. She once told Desmond, they listen differently when you speak like this. I want to check on how Desmond is doing in your class. Well, pause. The kind that announces bad news. He's adequate. He turns in assignments. Participates when asked. His writing is competent, though not exceptional. Desmond's fingers tightened around the book in his lap. Adequate. Competent. Words that felt like locks on doors. But I have to be honest with you, Mrs. Carter. I've been doing this a long time, and I've learned to recognize different kinds of students. Some are naturally academic. They thrive in college. Some are more practical-minded. They do better with their hands. Technical training, vocational paths, that sort of thing. Patricia's voice sharpened. What are you saying about my son? I'm saying he's not college material. It dropped like a hammer. He's more vocational track. And there's nothing wrong with that. Ms. Delacroix continued, in a tone that suggested she believed otherwise. The world needs mechanics, electricians, people who work with their hands, honest professions, realistic futures. The wall seemed thinner than ever. Desmond's face felt hot. His mother's reply was careful, but tight with anger. He reads every night. He writes stories. He questions everything. That boy lives in books. Mrs. Carter, the teacher interrupted, I know this is difficult to hear, but sometimes the kindest thing we can do is help students develop realistic expectations. I've seen too many kids aim too high and end up lost. Not meant for it. That's what she meant. Not meant for college. Not meant for ambition. Not meant for more. Patricia pushed back, gently but firmly. She talked about Desmond's library visits, his dream of becoming a journalist, the fact that he was the only student in his grade accepted into the school's newspaper club. She talked about how he filled notebooks with essays no one had assigned. Ms. Delacroix responded the way you do when you've had this conversation too many times, with detached certainty. I understand your hopes for him, I do, but hope isn't enough. College is expensive, and frankly, it would be a waste of money for a student like Desmond. He'd be better served by training for something practical. There are good programs. He could live a perfectly decent life without setting himself up for disappointment. A perfectly decent life. It wasn't a suggestion. It was a life sentence, safe, small, and suffocating. When the meeting ended, Patricia walked out older than when she'd gone in. Her shoulders were lower. Her jaw was clenched. She didn't say a word as they walked through the halls and out into the wind. At the bus stop, they sat in silence. The cold seeped in through Desmond's jeans and jacket, but it was nothing compared to the chill growing in his chest. On the ride home, his mother finally spoke. "She doesn't know you like I do," she said softly, still staring out the window. Teachers don't know everything. But Desmond heard it. The doubt. Even she had to wonder, what if that woman was right? What if they were both reaching too far? That night, Desmond started a new kind of journal. Not stories. Not poetry. Just truth. He wrote about teachers who confuse cruelty with realism. About the way dreams get drained one sentence at a time. About how the world takes your voice before you ever get a chance to use it. If no one wanted to listen to him in that classroom, he'd speak somewhere else. If no one gave him a mic, he'd build his own. He carried her words, not college material, like a scar, but he didn't let it define him. He didn't wear it. He sharpened it. And one day, he was going to hand it back to her. The rejections came fast. Ohio State, Case Western, Cleveland State. Every envelope that arrived had the same script printed in different fonts. "We regret to inform you different schools." Same silence. Desmond Carter kept every one of them in a shoebox under his bed. They weren't surprises. They felt more like confirmations. He could still hear Ms. Delacroix's voice echoing through those thin hallway walls. Not college material. It was like every school had just signed their agreement. Then, one envelope came without rejection. Cuyahoga Community College. It wasn't selective. It didn't care about test scores. It needed enrollment numbers, and Desmond had a pulse and a high school diploma. That was enough. It wasn't a dream, but it was a foothold. Desmond took it. He moved into a tiny studio apartment above a Chinese takeout spot on Cedar Road. The ceiling leaked in the winter, and the steam from the kitchen downstairs made the walls sweat. But it was his. A quiet place to think, to work, and to write. During the day, he stocked shelves at a chain pharmacy. Night shifts were spent in a diner kitchen, washing dishes until his hands cracked from hot water and industrial soap. In between, he squeezed in classes, communication, media, literature. He didn't sleep much, but that wasn't new. He wasn't trying to impress professors anymore. He was trying to survive, and maybe somehow tell a story that mattered. He started a blog his senior year of high school. It had been more of an event than a platform. Scattered thoughts about neighborhood life, inequality, the politics of language. The writing wasn't polished, but it was honest. 3 people read it, one of them his mom. Still, it gave him something, a place where his voice existed, even if no one heard it. That changed sophomore year. A post called "The Language Police" took off. It was about how black and poor kids get told their way of speaking is wrong, while wealthier kids get praised for being articulate. It was sharp, raw, and angry. It struck a nerve. Thousands of views. Then tens of thousands. People flooded the comment section. Teachers, parents, students, sharing stories, thanking him, calling it truth they didn't know how to say themselves. That's when Desmond realized something. He didn't need a classroom to be heard. He bought a second-hand camera, learned video editing on YouTube. His first videos were terrible. Bad lighting, tinny audio, jump cuts like hacksaws. But he kept going. He worked double shifts, saved tips, bought a better mic, learned how to color grade. He turned his blog into a micro-documentary series. Short pieces about education, race, and the systems that quietly kill potential. One video changed everything. It was called "Tracking Us." He interviewed classmates who had been told, just like him, that they weren't college material. Teachers who whispered about realistic goals. Parents who had to fight to keep their children in honors programs. It took 6 months to make. He edited between shifts. Storyboard between classes. Narrated at 2 a.m. when the building was quiet and the walk downstairs wasn't frying. When he uploaded it to YouTube, he had fewer than 500 subscribers. Then the share started. By the end of the month, Tracking Us had 3 million views. Teachers were showing it in classrooms. Activists were quoting it. A nonprofit in Chicago offered funding. A Cleveland reporter called him a rising voice in education equity. Desmond didn't celebrate. He just worked harder. He launched a podcast, Voices Untracked. He wrote essays about bias in curriculum. He spoke on panels about the school-to-prison pipeline. Every spare dollar went into better gear. Every new follower was fuel. By 23, he stopped washing dishes. By 25, he moved out of the apartment above the takeout place. By 27, he had a team of 3, an office space with real windows, and enough grant money to mentor kids who reminded him of himself. He had built something. But Ms. Delacroix's words were still lodged deep, like glass in the lungs. Not college material. Students from his background, better suited for vocational work. He thought about her more than he wanted to admit. Every success, every post, every video, every standing ovation, carried her voice as a background hum. She had been so certain, so composed, so wrong. Then one day, on a random Tuesday night, he was scrolling to the comments on a video about teacher bias when he saw her name. Not hers directly, but a student's. Ms. Delacroix still teaches at Jefferson. My sister has her now. She's still the same. That stopped him cold. Still there. Still writing kids off. The next morning, he didn't eat. Didn't reply to emails. Just sat in silence. The idea came fully formed. He wasn't going back as a student. He was going back with a microphone. Desmond Carter walked into Jefferson High on a Tuesday morning in March. He wore a charcoal blazer, navy shirt, and calm in his eyes. Clipped to his collar was a wireless mic. Behind him, Marcus, his lead camera operator, adjusted the lighting bag on his shoulder. The building smelled exactly the same: disinfectant, old textbooks, and cafeteria grease. Some things never change. The security guard barely looked up from his desk. You here for the interview? Desmond nodded once. We're profiling veteran educators in underserved schools. That was the pitch. Polished, safe, palatable. Principal Hayes met them in the front office. Desmond remembered him vaguely. He'd been a new hire when Desmond was a senior. Hayes still had the same stretched smile and political handshake. We're thrilled, Hayes said, pumping Desmond's hand. Ms. Delacroix is one of our most dedicated educators. 30 years in this building. She's mentored generations. Can't wait to speak with her, Desmond said smoothly. What he didn't say was, she shaped my life too, just not the way she thinks. When she walked into the office, she looked almost unchanged. Grayer hair, slight limp, but the same tight posture, the same cool gray eyes that once categorized children into futures they hadn't chosen. She didn't recognize him. Ms. Delacroix, he said, extending his hand. Thank you so much for agreeing to this interview. We're profiling educators who've shaped young minds across decades. She smiled, softened slightly, and sat a little taller. Perfect. The library had been prepped already. Marcus set up the lights. Soft fill from the left, edge highlight on the right, natural diffusion from the old windows. It made her look distinguished. Even. Desmond sat opposite her. The camera rolled. Let's start with your philosophy, he said, voice warm. What drives you after all these years? She launched into it. Clichés, buzzwords, platitudes polished by repetition. I believe in realism, in helping students understand their strengths. Too many kids today get participation trophies. I think it's kinder to set boundaries, to steer them toward what suits them. Desmond nodded slightly. What does that look like in practice? He asked. She paused, thinking, well, I've had students who didn't have academic backgrounds, kids who thought they were going to be lawyers or writers. But the truth is, college just wasn't realistic. It's better to encourage trade school, technical programs, something that fits their environment. She smiled like she was proud of that. Desmond didn't blink. Do you remember any specific examples? He asked. Oh, many, she said. One student in particular thought he was going to be a journalist. Sweet kid, but not realistic. I had a talk with his mother about managing expectations. She still didn't see it. Do you ever wonder what happened to students like that? He asked, gently. I hope they found good jobs. Stable work. I did my best to help them see what was attainable. Desmond sat forward. Do you remember telling a student he wasn't college material? That some people just aren't built for higher education. There it was. Her smile flickered. The eyes sharpened. Well, sometimes difficult conversations are necessary. Do you remember telling a black 8th grade student that vocational school was a better fit for him because college would be a waste of money for someone from his background? Silence. She blinked. I'm not sure which student you mean. That student was me. Desmond said it plainly. No anger. No satisfaction. Just clarity. Her face drained. Recognition didn't arrive all at once. It built slowly, like dawn behind storm clouds. You were in my class? November 2002, he said. You told my mother I was not college material, that I'd fail, that I wasn't built for it. I never meant to. You were wrong, he said, his voice steady. I didn't just go to college. I earned 2 degrees. I built a media platform that reaches millions. I've spoken to Congress. I mentor kids who hear the same words you gave me. He paused, letting her sit in it. And I came back with a camera, so the next kid you write off might see the other version of the story. She looked down. Her hands trembled slightly. Desmond wasn't angry. He'd been angry years ago. This was something colder, sharper. I'm not here to shame you, he continued. But the damage wasn't just mine. How many other students did you quietly steer away from their dreams? How many did you label with your limited vision of potential? Ms. Delacroix tried to answer, but the words tangled. The camera caught every frame of hesitation. Desmond stood and unclipped his mic. The interview's over. Marcus lowered the boom. Ms. Delacroix finally spoke. What are you going to do with this? Desmond looked at her one last time. I'm going to tell the truth, he said, just like I always have. Then he walked out,